Mother Bear lost in the village, this human baby followed her and did something shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. The morning sun cast gentle rays over the sleepy village of Pine Hollow. Nestled between ancient forests and rolling meadows, the village was usually a picture of tranquility. Today, however, the peaceful rhythm of village life was about to be dramatically interrupted. Olivia Bennet stood at her kitchen window, washing breakfast dishes while keeping a watchful eye on her 18-month-old son, Noah. The toddler played contentedly in their small garden, giggling as butterflies danced around the colorful flowers his mother had planted. His innocent laughter floated through the open window, bringing a smile to Olivia's face. "Noah, stay where Mommy can see you," she called out gently, though her reminder went unnoticed as the curious child continued his explorations. Suddenly, shouts erupted from the village center. Olivia felt her heart skip a beat as the commotion grew louder. Wiping her hands quickly on her apron, she rushed to the door, but was stopped by her neighbor Marcus, who appeared breathless at her doorstep. "Olivia, get inside and lock your doors. There's a bear in the village, a massive one. It's wandering between the houses." His voice trembled with urgency. A bear? Olivia's blood ran cold. Her eyes darted to the garden where Noah had been playing just moments ago. The small patch of grass was empty. "Noah?" she called, her voice rising with panic. "Noah!" The garden gate stood ajar, swinging slightly in the morning breeze. Beyond it lay the path to the village center, where the bear had been spotted. Meanwhile, in the village square, chaos had erupted. Villagers rushed indoors, slamming doors and windows shut. Some men had armed themselves with pitchforks and shovels, gathering in small, nervous clusters as they tried to decide what to do about their unexpected visitor. The bear, a large female with thick brown fur, lumbered between the houses, her massive paws leaving deep imprints in the soft earth. Her dark eyes darted anxiously from side to side, and her powerful muscles tensed with every shout and noise. But contrary to what the villagers believed, the bear wasn't hunting or looking to attack. There was something different in her movements, something that spoke of distress rather than aggression. She huffed and sniffed the air repeatedly, circling back to certain spots as if searching for something she had lost. The bear's ears twitched at every sound, her entire body language communicating not threat but desperation. Amidst the growing tension, little Noah Bennet toddled out from between two houses. His blue eyes widened with wonder at the scene before him. Unlike the adults who saw only danger, Noah saw something else entirely in the bear's movements. Perhaps it was the innocent perception of a child untainted by learned fears, or maybe it was something more profound, an innate connection between two living beings that transcended language and species. The bear paused, her massive head turning toward the tiny human who had appeared before her. Their eyes met across the village square, the enormous, wild creature and the small, defenseless child. The villagers who spotted Noah froze in horrified silence, too afraid that any sudden movement might provoke the bear to attack. What happened next would leave the entire village in disbelief. Instead of crying or running away, Noah smiled. His tiny hand lifted in a wave, the gesture so innocent and trusting that it seemed to pierce through the tension in the air. And then, with the fearlessness that only a child could possess, Noah took a step toward the bear. "No!" someone gasped, but it was too late to stop what was unfolding. The bear didn't charge. She didn't growl. Instead, she lowered her great head, her eyes fixed on the approaching child with what could only be described as recognition. Not of Noah specifically, but of something in his manner that spoke to her own distress. In that moment, as the village held its collective breath, Noah Bennett became the unlikely bridge between two worlds that rarely met in peace. And what the village would soon discover was that this encounter was far from random. It was the beginning of something truly extraordinary. Noah! Olivia's terrified scream cut through the silence as she burst into the village square, her face drained of all color. She had run all the way from their home, her heart pounding with fear, unlike anything she had ever experienced. The sight before her, her baby standing mere feet away from a wild bear, made her legs buckle beneath her. Samuel Reed, the blacksmith, caught her before she fell. "Don't move," he whispered urgently, his strong arms holding her back. Any sudden movement might provoke the bear to attack. Olivia struggled against his grip, tears streaming down her face. "That's my son," she sobbed. "Please, Noah, come back." But Noah didn't turn. The toddler was completely entranced by the massive creature before him. As the adults watched in horror, he took another step forward, then another, until he was close enough to touch the bear's fur. Elder Thomas Wilson, the oldest resident of Pine Hollow at 86 years, pushed to the front of the gathering crowd. His weathered face creased with concern as he squinted at the scene. "Wait," he said, raising a hand to stop several young men who were inching forward with their makeshift weapons. "Something's not right here. Look at the bear. Really look at her." The villagers, frozen in place, followed the elder's gaze. The bear's posture wasn't threatening. Her eyes weren't filled with rage or hunger. Instead, there was something almost human in her suffering, a silent plea that transcended species. Noah, innocent and unafraid, reached out his tiny hand and touched the bear's snout. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. Olivia closed her eyes, unable to watch what she feared would happen next. But instead of snapping at the child, the bear made a soft whimpering sound. She nudged Noah gently with her nose, then turned and took a few steps toward the edge of the village. There, she stopped and looked back at the child, as if waiting. "She wants him to follow her," Elder Wilson murmured in disbelief. "Absolutely not," Olivia cried, finally breaking free from Samuel's grasp and rushing toward her son. But before she could reach Noah, something extraordinary happened. A faint, high-pitched cry echoed from the direction the bear was heading, the sound of a bear cub in distress. "That's why she's here," gasped Maggie Foster, the village healer. "She's not looking to attack, she's looking for help." Noah, as if understanding perfectly what the adults were just beginning to grasp, pointed in the direction of the cry and babbled excitedly. The mother bear huffed softly, her eyes moving from the child to the edge of the village and back again. "Her cub must be in trouble," Elder Wilson said, leaning heavily on his walking stick. "And somehow, she's come looking for help." Olivia finally reached Noah, scooping him up in her arms and holding him tight against her chest. But to everyone's surprise, Noah squirmed and pointed insistently toward the bear, who still waited patiently at the edge of the square. "No, Noah," Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to get inside." "Perhaps the child sees what we don't," Elder Wilson suggested gently. His eyes, clouded with age but sharp with wisdom, studied the scene before him. "In all my years, I've never seen anything like this. That bear isn't here to harm us. She's asking for our help." As if to confirm his words, the mother bear let out another soft sound, a mixture of a whimper and a huff, and took another step toward the forest before looking back expectantly. The villagers exchanged uncertain glances. For generations they had feared the forest creatures, especially the bears. Tales of attacks and maulings were told to children to keep them from wandering too far. Yet here was a mother bear, standing before them not as a threat, but as a desperate parent seeking assistance. Noah continued to squirm in Olivia's arms, pointing and babbling with increasing urgency. The sound of the cub's cries grew weaker, adding to the tension of the moment. "We can't just ignore this," Samuel said finally, lowering his pitchfork. "If that cub dies, who knows what the mother might do then? Her grief could turn to rage." Olivia looked down at her son, who had stopped struggling and was now looking up at her with those innocent blue eyes. In them, she saw something that made her breath catch. A wisdom far beyond his years, an understanding that seemed impossible for a child so young. "What should we do?" she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. The answer came from an unexpected source. Eliza Thornton, who had lost her husband to a bear attack 5 years earlier, stepped forward. Everyone expected her to oppose any kind of help, to demand the bear be driven away or killed. Instead, she spoke softly, her voice carrying across the now silent square. "We help," she said simply. "My James would have wanted us to help." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Eliza's face was set with determination, though her hands trembled slightly at her sides. "That creature is a mother, just like you, Olivia," she continued, "and right now her child needs help. I won't let another tragedy happen because of fear." The mother bear, as if understanding the shift in the human's attitude, moved a few steps closer to the forest edge and looked back imploringly. Samuel Reed stepped forward, joined by Marcus and 3 other men from the village. "We'll follow," Samuel decided. "But everyone else should stay here." "No," Olivia said suddenly, her voice stronger than before. "I'm coming too." She looked down at Noah, who had calmed in her arms, and was now watching the bear with solemn curiosity. "We both are." Elder Wilson nodded slowly. "The child has some kind of connection with the bear. Perhaps he should come." He raised a hand to silence the protests that immediately rose. "Olivia will carry him, and we'll all stay close." Sometimes the wisdom of the innocent outweighs the caution of the experienced. And so, in an act that would later be recounted as either incredible bravery or incredible foolishness, a small group of villagers, led by a blacksmith, a widow, an elder, and a young mother carrying her toddler, followed the desperate mother bear toward the edge of the forest. The bear moved with surprising gentleness, pausing often to make sure the humans were still following. Noah remained calm in his mother's arms, occasionally pointing or making soft noises of his own, almost as if he were communicating with the massive creature leading them. As they reached the forest edge, the cub's cries became more distinct, though noticeably weaker. The bear led them not deep into the woods as they had feared, but to a shallow ravine just beyond the tree line. There, trapped between 2 fallen logs and clearly injured, lay a tiny bear cub. The mother bear hurried to her baby, nuzzling it gently and making soft sounds of comfort. Then she turned to look at the humans, her eyes filled with what could only be described as pleading. "The cub's leg is trapped," Samuel observed, inching closer to get a better look, "and I think it's injured. That's why she couldn't free it herself. She needed more hands, more help than she could provide alone." Olivia felt a tug at her heart as she watched the mother bear's gentle interaction with her cub. Despite the vast differences between their species, the love of a mother for her child was unmistakably the same. She looked down at Noah, who was watching the scene with intense focus, and suddenly understood why he had been so drawn to the bear. "He knew," she whispered. Somehow, Noah knew she wasn't a threat. He saw her as a mother, not a monster. The mother bear continued to look expectantly at the humans, occasionally nudging at the logs that trapped her cub, but unable to move them alone. Samuel approached cautiously, followed by Marcus. If we work together, we can lift these logs enough for the cub to get free, Samuel said, assessing the situation. But someone will need to pull the cub out once we create an opening. Eliza Thornton stepped forward, her face set with determination. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "I'm the smallest, and I've handled injured animals before." The mother bear watched their movements carefully, her body tense but not threatening. She seemed to understand that these strange two-legged creatures were trying to help, not harm. "On my count," Samuel instructed, positioning himself at one end of the heaviest log while Marcus took the other. 1, 2, 3. With a tremendous effort, they lifted the log just enough to create a small gap. Eliza darted forward, reaching gently for the cub. For a heart-stopping moment, the mother bear growled, her protective instincts flaring. Everyone froze. And then, something remarkable happened. Noah wriggled free from Olivia's arms before she could stop him and toddled forward, placing himself between Eliza and the mother bear. He made a soft cooing sound, raising his small hand toward the bear in a gesture that somehow communicated more than words ever could. The bear's growl subsided. She looked at Noah, then at Eliza, then back at her trapped cub. Slowly, deliberately, she backed away just enough to give Eliza room to work. "Hurry," Samuel grunted, the weight of the log straining his muscles. "We can't hold this forever." Eliza moved quickly but gently. The cub whimpered as she carefully extracted it from the gap, cradling it against her chest once it was free. The tiny creature was frightened but too weak to struggle. A deep gash ran along its hind leg, and it was clearly malnourished. "The poor thing's been trapped for days," Eliza murmured, her eyes filled with compassion. "It needs care." The mother bear approached cautiously, sniffing at her cub in Eliza's arms. The humans tensed, but Noah remained calm, standing beside Eliza with no trace of fear. The bear nuzzled her cub, then looked up at Eliza with such intelligence in her gaze that it sent shivers down everyone's spine. "She knows we want to help," Elder Wilson said softly from where he stood. "The question is, will she let us?" As if in answer, the mother bear backed away slightly, her eyes never leaving her cub, but her posture indicating not threat but a wary acceptance. "We need to take the cub back to the village," Eliza decided. "Just long enough to treat its wounds and give it some nourishment. Then we can bring it back." Olivia finally recovered from her shock at Noah's actions and hurried forward to reclaim her son. But as she reached for him, she paused, struck by the scene before her, her toddler standing fearlessly beside a wild bear, seemingly mediating between two worlds. "Do you think the mother will follow us?" Marcus asked nervously, eyeing the massive bear. "I think she'll follow her cub wherever it goes," Elder Wilson replied. "The question is whether we're ready to welcome her into our village, not as an enemy but as a mother seeking help." The group exchanged glances, the weight of this unprecedented situation settling on their shoulders. What they decided next would either mark the beginning of a remarkable story of compassion and understanding, or end in tragedy. Noah, oblivious to the adult's concerns, reached out and gently patted the mother bear's paw, a gesture so innocent yet so profound that it brought tears to Olivia's eyes. In that moment, she made her decision. "We help them both," she said firmly. "The cub and the mother. They come to the village together, and we care for them until the cub is well enough to return to the wild." Samuel nodded slowly, respect evident in his eyes. "If you're sure, Olivia." "I'm sure," she replied, watching as her son interacted with the bear with complete trust. "Noah saw what we couldn't. Maybe it's time we learned from him." And so, in an unprecedented procession, the villagers headed back to Pine Hollow, Eliza carrying the injured cub, followed by the massive mother bear, who was, in turn, followed by Noah walking hand in hand with his own mother. Behind them came Samuel, Marcus, and Elder Wilson, their weapons lowered, their hearts open to the extraordinary events unfolding before them. Word spread quickly through the village. By the time they reached the square, every resident of Pine Hollow had gathered to witness the remarkable sight. A mother bear, following peacefully behind a group of humans carrying her cub, guided by the innocent trust of a toddler who somehow bridged the gap between two worlds. What happened over the next several days would transform not just Pine Hollow, but the relationship between the village and the wilderness that surrounded it. And at the center of it all was little Noah Bennett, whose innocent wisdom reminded everyone of a simple truth they had forgotten, that compassion knows no boundaries, not even those between species. The procession arrived at Maggie Foster's cottage, the village healer's home being the most logical place to treat an injured animal. The modest stone building, surrounded by herb gardens and with bundles of dried plants hanging from the ceiling beams, had long been a place of healing for the villagers. Now, it would serve a most unusual patient. "Bring the cub inside," Maggie instructed, holding her door wide open. Her eyes widened at the sight of the mother bear following closely behind Eliza, but to her credit, she didn't flinch. "I suppose we'll need to make room for the mother as well." "Are you certain that's wise?" asked Thomas Hunter, the village schoolteacher who had joined the growing crowd. Wild animals are unpredictable, especially when injured or threatened. More unpredictable than turning away a desperate mother? Eliza countered, cradling the whimpering cub gently against her chest. "I think we know which poses the greater danger." The mother bear paused at the threshold of Maggie's cottage, her massive form dwarfing the doorway. She sniffed cautiously, her eyes never leaving her cub. Noah, still holding his mother's hand, made a soft cooing sound and pointed inside, as if encouraging the bear to follow. Remarkably, she did. Maggie's cottage became the center of an unprecedented scene. A human healer tending to a bear cub on her kitchen table, while the mother bear watched from a corner, and a toddler sat on a stool nearby, occasionally babbling as if carrying on a conversation with the wild animal. "The leg isn't broken, thankfully," Maggie announced after a careful examination. "But the wound is deep and infected. The poor thing is severely dehydrated and hungry as well." She worked with practiced hands, cleaning the wound with herbal infusions and applying a poultice of crushed herbs mixed with honey. Throughout the procedure, the mother bear remained vigilant but calm, her eyes moving between her cub, the healer, and young Noah, who seemed completely at ease in the presence of the massive predator. "I've never seen anything like it," whispered Samuel to Olivia, who stood nearby, ready to grab Noah at the first sign of danger. "It's as if she understands we're helping." "Or perhaps she's simply desperate enough to trust," Olivia replied softly. "A mother will do anything for her child." Outside, the village buzzed with excitement and apprehension. Many remained fearful, arguing that bringing wild bears into their midst was foolhardy and dangerous. Others were moved by the unusual circumstances and the unexpected bond that seemed to exist between Noah and the mother bear. Elder Wilson addressed the gathered villagers, his voice carrying the weight of his years. "In all my life, I have never witnessed such an event. Perhaps this is a sign, a reminder that we share these woods, these mountains, with creatures who feel and suffer as we do." Night fell, and still Maggie worked, ensuring the cub was hydrated and nourished with a mixture of goat's milk and honey. The mother bear refused to leave the cottage, settling herself on the floor near the table where her cub lay. Noah, despite Olivia's attempts to take him home, threw such a tantrum at the suggestion of leaving that eventually she relented, allowing him to stay as long as she remained by his side. As the village settled into an uneasy sleep, something remarkable happened in Maggie Foster's cottage. Noah, growing tired but stubborn in his refusal to leave, eventually dozed off, his small body leaning against his mother's side. Olivia, exhausted from the day's events, soon followed, her arms wrapped protectively around her son. In the dimly lit cottage, the mother bear watched them sleep. Slowly, carefully, she rose from her spot in the corner and approached the sleeping pair. Maggie, who had been dozing in a chair nearby, woke with a start, her heart pounding. But before she could cry out or move to protect Olivia and Noah, she witnessed something that left her speechless. The mother bear, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for such a massive creature, nudged a blanket that had fallen to the floor. Using her snout and paws with surprising dexterity, she managed to drape it over the sleeping mother and child. Then, as if satisfied with her work, she returned to her spot near her cub, settled down, and closed her eyes. Maggie sat frozen, tears welling in her eyes at the simple act of reciprocal compassion she had just witnessed. In that moment, the line between human and animal blurred, revealing a shared capacity for kindness that transcended species. By morning, word of the unusual guests at Maggie's cottage had spread to neighboring villages. Curious visitors began to arrive, eager to witness the extraordinary scene for themselves. Edgar Pierce, a renowned naturalist from the next town over, arrived with his sketchbook and journals, his face alight with scientific curiosity. "This is unprecedented," he declared, after observing the bears and their interactions with Noah and the villagers. "There have been tales, of course, legends of wild animals seeking human help or forming unusual bonds with children. But to witness it firsthand, to document it." He shook his head in wonder as he made detailed sketches of the bears and copious notes about their behavior. The cub, whom Noah had taken to calling Luna for the distinctive crescent-shaped mark on her chest, improved rapidly under Maggie's care. By the third day, she was able to stand and take a few wobbly steps, her appetite returning with encouraging vigor. The mother bear, whom the villagers had begun referring to simply as Mama, continued to display remarkable patience and trust. She allowed the villagers to approach her cub, watching carefully but without aggression, as Maggie changed the dressings on Luna's wound and fed her strengthening broths and mashed berries. But the most remarkable relationship remained between Noah and Mama. The toddler spent hours sitting near the massive bear, babbling to her in his limited vocabulary, occasionally reaching out to pat her fur or offer her an apple from Maggie's stores. And Mama, defying every natural instinct of a wild creature, accepted his presence with what could only be described as affection. "It challenges everything we thought we knew," Edgar Pierce commented as he watched Noah leaning comfortably against Mama's side while reading to her from a picture book, pointing at the illustrations and chattering away. The natural fear that should exist between a predator and a human child, especially one so young, simply isn't there. "Perhaps fear is learned, not innate," Olivia suggested, watching her son with a mixture of pride and lingering concern. "Noah doesn't know he should be afraid, and somehow Mama senses that innocence and responds to it." The relationship between the bears and the village evolved over the following days. Farmers began leaving offerings of fruit and vegetables at the edge of Maggie's garden for Mama. Children, initially kept far from the cottage by their fearful parents, were gradually allowed to approach, always under supervision, to catch a glimpse of the unusual guests. Luna grew stronger each day, her wound healing cleanly thanks to Maggie's skilled care. Soon she was playing in Maggie's cottage, her natural curiosity and playfulness emerging as her health improved. Noah became her favorite playmate, the two of them rolling a wooden ball back and forth across the floor while their mothers watched with identical expressions of protective vigilance. On the seventh day, a change came over Mama. She grew restless, pacing the confines of the cottage and gazing out the windows toward the forest beyond the village. Luna, too, seemed to sense a shift, her play becoming more subdued as she watched her mother with attentive eyes. "It's time," Elder Wilson said when he came to visit that afternoon. "They need to return to their home in the wild." A deep sadness settled over the village at the pronouncement, though all knew it was inevitable and right. The bears did not belong in the human world, despite the remarkable bridge that had been built between their species. The next morning, a solemn procession formed at Maggie's cottage. Luna, now strong enough to walk on her own, though still with a slight limp, stayed close to her mother's side. Mama stood tall and alert, her eyes fixed on the forest visible beyond the village's edge. Noah, understanding in his innocent way that his friends were leaving, clung to Olivia's hand with unusual solemnity. His usual chatter was absent, replaced by a quiet sadness that tugged at the hearts of all who witnessed it. Edgar Pierce continued his documentation, his quill scratching rapidly across the pages of his journal as he recorded this final chapter of the extraordinary encounter. "There will be those who doubt this account," he murmured to Elder Wilson. "Those who will say it's impossible, that wild bears cannot form such bonds with humans, especially not with a child." "Let them doubt," the elder replied simply. "We who witnessed it know the truth." The villagers lined the path leading from Maggie's cottage to the forest edge, forming a respectful corridor for the departing bears. Many held small offerings, bundles of berries, honeycombs, fragments of bread, which they placed along the path as farewell gifts. Eliza Thornton stepped forward as the bears prepared to leave, her face composed, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you," she said softly to Mama, "for reminding us that there is more that connects us than divides us." She placed a small bundle of healing herbs near the bear's paws, a final gift from the human healer to the wild mother. Mama regarded her for a long moment, her dark eyes reflecting an intelligence that no one could deny. Then, in a gesture that drew gasps from the onlookers, she dipped her massive head in what appeared to be a nod of acknowledgement. The bears began their journey home, moving slowly down the path between the gathered villagers. Luna frolicked slightly ahead, her recovery evident in her bouncing steps, while Mama followed with dignified pace. They had almost reached the forest edge when Noah suddenly broke free from Olivia's grasp. Before anyone could stop him, he ran toward Mama, his small arms outstretched. "Noah!" Olivia cried, her heart in her throat as she rushed after him. The entire village held its breath. Mama turned, her massive form towering over the approaching child. Time seemed to stand still in that moment, a wild predator face to face with a human child, two worlds meeting in a space where fear and instinct should prevail. Instead of fear, there was only connection. Noah reached Mama and wrapped his tiny arms as far around her front leg as they would go, pressing his face against her fur in a child's embrace. Mama lowered her head, gently nuzzling the top of his head with her snout, in a gesture so tender it brought tears to the eyes of even the most stoic villagers. After a moment that seemed both fleeting and eternal, Noah stepped back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved wooden bear that Samuel had made for him, a token to remember his unusual friend by. With solemn ceremony, he placed it on the ground before Mama. "Bye-bye," he said, his small voice clear in the hushed silence. Mama looked at the tiny wooden figure, then back at Noah. She huffed softly, a sound that seemed almost like a sigh. Then, with visible gentleness, she picked up the carving in her mouth and turned toward the forest, where Luna waited impatiently at the tree line. Together, mother and cub disappeared into the shadows beneath the ancient trees, leaving behind a village forever changed by their visit. In the years that followed, the story of Noah and the bears became legend, not just in Pine Hollow but throughout the region. Edgar Pierce's detailed account, published in the prestigious Natural Science Quarterly, caused a sensation in scientific circles, with many scholars dismissing it as fantasy or exaggeration. But those who had witnessed the events firsthand knew the truth of what had occurred in their small village. For Noah Bennett, the experience left an indelible mark. Though he was too young to retain clear memories of the event as he grew older, the story told and retold by his mother and the villagers shaped his character and his understanding of the world. He developed an uncanny affinity for animals of all kinds, a gentle soul who seemed to intuitively understand creatures in a way that others could not. Pine Hollow itself was transformed. Where once the villagers had viewed the surrounding wilderness with fear and suspicion, they now approached it with respect and a sense of kinship. Hunting practices changed. No longer did they take more than was needed, and never did they hunt bear. The forest edge, once considered a boundary to be feared, became a place of peaceful coexistence. Elder Wilson, before his passing 3 winters after the bear incident, established what came to be known as the Forest Accord, a promise that the village would protect the wilderness and its inhabitants as they would protect their own. In return, they believed the forest would continue to provide for them through its abundance. Olivia, watching her son grow into a curious and compassionate child, often thought of Mama and wondered what had become of her and Luna. Had they thrived in their return to the wild? Did Mama ever think of the strange human child who had shown her kindness when she needed it most? These questions remained unanswered until a crisp autumn day 5 years after the bears had left Pine Hollow. Noah, now 6 years old and as adventurous as ever, was helping Olivia gather late-season berries at the forest edge. His copper hair, so like his father's, gleamed in the dappled sunlight that filtered through the canopy of gold and crimson leaves. James Bennett, who had been away on a trading journey during the bear incident, watched his son with pride from a short distance away, marveling at the boy's fearless curiosity. "Don't go too far in, Noah," James cautioned as the boy ventured closer to the dense trees in pursuit of a particularly plump blackberry bush. "I won't, Papa," Noah replied, though his attention was already captured by something beyond the berry bush. He tilted his head, listening intently, then turned to his parents with excitement lighting his face. "Do you hear that?" James and Olivia exchanged concerned glances. "Hear what, sweetheart?" Olivia asked, moving closer to her son. "The music," Noah replied simply, pointing deeper into the forest. "It's calling me." Before either parent could react, Noah darted between the trees, following a sound that only he could hear. James immediately sprinted after him, with Olivia close behind, their hearts pounding with fear. "Noah!" James called, pushing through the underbrush. "Noah, come back!" But their son had vanished among the ancient trunks and thick foliage, moving with a sureness that belied his young age and limited experience in the deep forest. For nearly an hour, James and Olivia searched frantically, calling Noah's name until their voices grew hoarse. They were joined by Samuel, Marcus, and other villagers who had been working nearby, the search party growing as word spread of Noah's disappearance. "We need to expand the search before nightfall," Samuel said grimly, his experienced eyes scanning the darkening forest. The autumn sun was already low in the sky, and the thought of a 6-year-old boy alone in the wilderness after dark filled everyone with dread. It was Eliza Thornton who suggested what seemed like madness to many of the searchers. "We need to call her," she said firmly. "Call who?" James asked, his face haggard with worry. "Mama," Eliza replied simply, using the name they had given the mother bear years ago. "If anyone in these woods would help Noah, it would be her." "That's absurd," Thomas Hunter objected. "Even if that bear is still alive, what makes you think she would remember a human child after all this time? Bears are wild animals, not fairy tale creatures." "Perhaps," Eliza conceded. "But I saw the connection between that bear and Noah with my own eyes. It defied explanation then, and it defies explanation now. But it was real." She turned to Olivia, her eyes gentle but determined. "What do we have to lose by trying?" Desperate and willing to try anything, Olivia nodded. The search party made their way to a small clearing not far from where Noah had disappeared. There, Eliza cupped her hands around her mouth and let out a series of calls, not quite human, not quite animal, that she had learned from her late husband, who had been a skilled woodsman. The forest fell silent after her calls faded. The searchers held their breath, straining to hear any response. Minutes passed with nothing but the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. "It was worth trying," Samuel said gently, placing a comforting hand on Eliza's shoulder. "Now, we should split up and continue the search while there's still light." But as they prepared to separate into smaller groups, a sound stopped them. The snap of a branch, followed by the unmistakable huffing breath of a large animal moving through the underbrush. James immediately pushed Olivia behind him, raising the walking staff he carried. The other men similarly moved into defensive positions, their earlier openness to Eliza's idea forgotten in the face of potential danger. Through the trees came a massive shape, larger than any of them remembered. The bear's fur was darker, streaked with silver around the muzzle, but there was no mistaking her identity. Mama had returned. She stopped at the edge of the clearing, her dark eyes scanning the group of humans. There was recognition in that gaze, a memory that had endured through the years. She huffed again, then turned and looked back the way she had come, as if expecting the humans to follow. "She wants us to go with her," Eliza whispered. James looked at the others in disbelief. "You can't be serious. We're not following a bear into the forest." "That bear saved my son's life once before," Olivia said, stepping out from behind her husband. "I trust her now." She moved toward Mama with determined steps, ignoring James's attempt to hold her back. The bear watched Olivia approach, neither retreating nor showing any sign of aggression. When Olivia was within a few feet, Mama turned and began walking slowly into the forest, pausing to look back as if to ensure she was being followed. "I'm going with her," Olivia declared, her voice brooking no argument, "with or without the rest of you." James, his face a mask of conflicted emotions, quickly joined his wife. "We go together," he said firmly. The others, after a moment's hesitation, followed as well. Even Thomas Hunter, the most vocal skeptic, could not deny the deliberateness of the bear's behavior. Mama led them deeper into the forest than any of them typically ventured, following paths known only to the creatures of the wild. As the last light of day faded, their progress slowed, the humans stumbling over roots and rocks that the bear navigated with ease. "We should make torches," Samuel suggested, after James nearly fell into a ravine hidden by the gathering darkness. "No," Eliza countered. "Fire will frighten the forest creatures. We need to trust her." She nodded toward Mama, who waited patiently ahead, her form a darker shadow against the deepening twilight. They continued their strange procession, the bear leading and the humans following, until they reached a part of the forest none of them recognized. Ancient trees towered overhead, their massive trunks wider than 3 men could encircle with outstretched arms. The ground was soft with centuries of fallen leaves, and the air carried a different quality, older somehow, and filled with a hushed reverence. Mama stopped before what appeared to be a curtain of hanging vines. She looked back at the humans once more, then pushed through the natural barrier. After a moment's hesitation, Olivia followed, with James right beside her. What they found beyond the vines stole the breath from their lungs. A hidden valley lay before them, illuminated by an ethereal blue glow that seemed to emanate from the very soil and vegetation. Massive trees with luminescent bark formed a protective circle around a crystal-clear pool, fed by a small waterfall that sparkled as if made of liquid starlight. Flowers, unlike any they had ever seen, bloomed in profusion, their petals glowing with soft colors that shifted and pulsed like gentle heartbeats. And there, seated beside the glowing pool with his back to them, was Noah. He was not alone. Surrounding him in a loose semicircle were forest creatures of all kinds, deer with elegant antlers that seemed to branch into impossible patterns, foxes with unusually bright eyes, rabbits with fur that shimmered in the strange light, birds of species they had never seen perched on low branches, and most remarkably a young bear, nearly full-grown but still with the gangly proportions of adolescence, lay with her head resting comfortably in Noah's lap. Luna, the cub they had saved, now grown into a beautiful young bear, still bearing the distinctive crescent mark on her chest. "Noah!" Olivia cried, unable to contain herself any longer. The boy turned, his face lighting up at the sight of his parents. "Mama! Papa! Look what I found!" He gestured expansively at the magical glade around him. This is where the forest heart beats. As Noah spoke, the adults became aware of a rhythmic pulsing in the light that suffused the hidden valley, a slow, steady beat that seemed to resonate through the ground beneath their feet and the air they breathed. Mama moved past the humans to join her daughter, nuzzling Luna affectionately before settling beside her. Luna raised her head from Noah's lap just long enough to acknowledge her mother's return, then promptly replaced it, clearly enjoying the boy's gentle stroking of her fur. "I've been waiting for you," Noah said cheerfully, showing none of the fear or distress his parents had been imagining. "Luna said you would come eventually." "Luna said," James repeated weakly, looking from his son to the young bear and back again. Noah nodded as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Not with words like we use, but I can hear her here." He tapped his chest over his heart. "And she can hear me too." The adults exchanged bewildered glances, struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. Even Eliza, who had most strongly believed in the connection between Noah and the bears, seemed overwhelmed by the reality before them. "This place has been here forever," Noah continued, oblivious to the adults' confusion. "It's where all the forest creatures come when they need healing or safety. Luna and Mama brought me here because they wanted to show me something important." As if on cue, the pulsing light in the glade intensified, focusing around the pool at the center. The water began to shimmer more brightly, and images formed on its surface. Not reflections, but scenes from the forest played out like living paintings. The adults moved closer, drawn by the mesmerizing display. In the pool, they saw images of the forest changing through seasons, creatures being born and dying, the endless cycle of life unfolding in harmony. Then the images shifted, showing humans entering the forest, first with respect and reverence, living in balance with the natural world, then later with axes and fire, taking without giving back, breaking the ancient harmony. "The forest is dying," Noah said softly, his young voice somehow deeper and more resonant in the magical space. "Not just our forest, but forests everywhere. The old ways are being forgotten. That's why Luna brought me here, to show me, so I could show others." The images in the pool changed again, showing scenes of destruction, trees falling, animals fleeing, streams running dry or dark with pollution. The pulsing light of the glade dimmed, as if in sorrow. "But it doesn't have to be this way," Noah continued. As he spoke, the pool's visions shifted once more, showing humans and nature coexisting in harmony. Sustainable harvesting, replanting, protecting. The glade's light strengthened, pulsing with renewed vigor. "The forest remembers kindness," Noah said, gently scratching behind Luna's ears. "Just like Mama remembered me. And it forgives, just like Mama forgave the village even though people had hurt bears before. But it needs our help now." Olivia knelt beside her son, her mind reeling from the impossibility of what she was witnessing, yet unable to deny the truth before her eyes. "How can we help, sweetheart?" "We need to renew the promise," Noah replied. "The one Elder Wilson made, but people are starting to forget. And we need to share it with other villages, other forests." He looked up at his mother with eyes that seemed older than his years. "That's why I had to come here, to learn so I could teach." James joined his wife and son, his earlier fear and skepticism replaced by a sense of wonder and purpose. "Then we'll help you, Noah. We'll renew the promise and spread it as far as we can." The other villagers murmured their agreement, even Thomas Hunter nodding solemnly as he gazed at the visions in the pool. As if responding to their commitment, the glade's light pulsed more strongly. The animals around Noah stirred, some departing silently into the surrounding forest, while others remained, watching the humans with intelligent eyes that held neither fear nor hostility. "There's one more thing," Noah said, his voice taking on the wondering tone of a child once more. "Luna says I can visit whenever I want now that I know the way, and she says other children can learn to hear the forest, too, if we teach them." Mama rose from her place beside Luna and approached James and Olivia. The massive bear regarded them solemnly for a long moment, then did something that would forever remain etched in their memories. She lowered her massive head in what was unmistakably a bow, an acknowledgement of equals, of shared responsibility for the world they both inhabited. Then she turned to Noah and nudged him gently with her snout. The boy laughed and stood, giving Luna a final pat before moving to stand between his parents. "It's time to go home now," he said. "But we'll come back soon." As they prepared to leave the magical glade, Eliza Thornton approached Mama with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, echoing the words she had spoken years ago when the bears had left their village. "For everything." Mama huffed softly in response, then turned and lumbered into the forest with Luna at her side, the two bears disappearing among the ancient trees as naturally as shadows melting into darkness. The journey back to Pine Hollow seemed shorter than the outward trek, though none of the adults could have retraced the path without Noah's confident guidance. The boy led them unerringly through the dark forest, occasionally pausing to listen to voices only he could hear or to point out hidden landmarks. By the time they reached the village, word of Noah's disappearance had spread, and nearly every resident was awake and waiting anxiously for news. The return of the search party was met with cries of relief and joy, which turned to wonder and amazement as the story of what they had witnessed began to circulate. In the days and weeks that followed, Pine Hollow changed once more. The forest accord established by Elder Wilson was renewed with solemn ceremony. Its provisions expanded and strengthened. Messengers were sent to neighboring villages, carrying the story of Noah and the bears, of the hidden heart of the forest, and the responsibility all humans shared for its protection. Some scoffed, dismissing the tale as fantasy or the deluded imaginings of isolated villagers. But many listened, and some, particularly children, heard something in the story that resonated deep within them, awakening an ancient connection that modern life had all but severed. Noah Bennett grew up to become a bridge between worlds, not just between humans and animals, but between the old ways and the new, between respect for tradition and the progress of innovation. Under his guidance, Pine Hollow became renowned for its sustainable practices and the unusual harmony that existed between the village and the surrounding wilderness. And sometimes, on moonlit nights when the forest was quiet, visitors to Pine Hollow would report strange sightings. A boy, now grown to a man, walking among the ancient trees with two massive bears at his side, their forms illuminated by a gentle blue glow that seemed to rise from the earth itself. These sightings were never confirmed, of course, and most dismissed them as mere legends. But the people of Pine Hollow knew better. They had witnessed firsthand the extraordinary bond between a human child and a desperate mother bear, a connection that had grown into something far more profound than anyone could have imagined. They had seen how compassion could transcend boundaries, how understanding could heal ancient wounds, and how the wisdom of a child could sometimes outshine the knowledge of the wisest adults. And whenever a bear was spotted near the village, the residents of Pine Hollow did not react with fear or aggression. Instead, they would nod respectfully and whisper a simple greeting. "Welcome, friend. May the forest heart beat strong within you." For they understood, as Noah had taught them, that the rhythm of life pulsed through all creatures, bear and human alike, binding them together in a dance as old as the forest itself. And in that understanding, they found not just peace but purpose, to protect and preserve the delicate balance of the world they shared, ensuring that the story of Noah and the bears would continue to be told for generations to come. In the heart of the forest, a blue light pulsed steadily, its rhythm matched by the gentle breathing of two bears, one with silver-streaked fur and wise, ancient eyes, the other bearing a crescent mark upon her chest, as they guarded a secret as old as time itself, waiting for those with the wisdom to seek it and the innocence to understand. And somewhere between the village and the wilderness, a small wooden bear carving rested in a hollow tree, a simple token of a friendship that had changed the world in ways both profound and enduring. A reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary miracles begin with the most ordinary acts of compassion. The end, or so the story was often concluded when told around village fires throughout the region. But in truth, the tale of Noah and the bears had one final chapter, one so personal and profound that it was shared only among the closest families of Pine Hollow, passed down through generations as a sacred epilogue to an already extraordinary story. 30 years after Noah's discovery of the forest heart, Pine Hollow had flourished into a model of harmony between humanity and nature. The small village had grown into a thriving community known far and wide for its sustainable practices and deep reverence for the wilderness that surrounded it. Travelers came from distant lands to learn the Pine Hollow way, carrying the seeds of change back to their own communities. Noah Bennett, now a man of 35 with silver threads beginning to appear at his temples, had become the village's guardian and teacher. Though he had traveled widely in his youth, spreading the message of the forest accord, he had always returned to his home, drawn by an unbreakable connection to the ancient woods that had shaped his destiny. On a crisp autumn evening, much like the one when he had first been led to the forest heart as a child, Noah sat alone on his porch, watching the golden light of sunset filter through the trees. His wife, Lily, had taken their 2 children, 10-year-old Eliza, named for the woman who had helped save Luna, and 7-year-old Thomas, named for Elder Wilson, to visit her family in a neighboring village. The solitude was rare and welcome, giving Noah time to reflect on the journey his life had taken. He closed his eyes, feeling the familiar pulse of the forest, fainter here at the village edge than within the hidden glade, but present nonetheless, a constant companion throughout his life. A sound drew his attention, the soft crunch of leaves beneath careful footsteps. Noah opened his eyes, expecting to see a neighbor or perhaps a late-returning hunter. Instead, his breath caught in his throat. Mama stood at the edge of his garden, her once dark fur now almost completely silver with age. Her massive form was thinner than he remembered, her movements slower, more deliberate. Behind her stood Luna, now a magnificent adult bear in her prime, and beside Luna were 2 younger bears, her cubs, nearly grown themselves. "Hello, old friend," Noah said softly, rising from his chair. His heart swelled with emotion at the sight of the bear who had changed his life and the lives of so many others. It's been a while. Though he had occasionally glimpsed the bears during his visits to the forest heart over the years, they had maintained a respectful distance, guardians of the sacred place rather than companions as they had once been. This visit to his home was unprecedented. Mama huffed softly in response, her dark eyes fixed on Noah with the same intelligence and depth he remembered from his childhood. She took a step forward, then stopped, swaying slightly. Noah's joy turned to concern as he realized the purpose of this unexpected visit. He had seen enough of nature's cycles to recognize what was happening. Mama was dying. With tears welling in his eyes, Noah descended from his porch and approached the ancient bear. Luna and her cubs remained at the forest edge, watching but not interfering in this final reunion. "You came to say goodbye," Noah whispered as he reached Mama's side. The old bear huffed again, softer this time, and lowered her massive head until it rested against Noah's chest. He wrapped his arms around her neck, burying his face in her silver fur, inhaling the familiar wild scent that had never left his memory. For a long moment they stood together, the man and the bear, connected by a bond that defied explanation. All the years fell away, and Noah was once again the innocent child who had seen beyond fear to the desperate mother beneath the fearsome exterior. "Thank you," he whispered into her fur, "for everything you taught me, for showing me the way." Mama pulled back slightly, her intelligent eyes studying his face as if committing it to memory. Then, with deliberate movements, she raised one massive paw and pressed it gently against Noah's chest, directly over his heart. The message was clear, even without words. The connection they shared would never be broken, not even by death. The rhythm of the forest heart beat within him as it did within her, an eternal pulse that transcended the boundaries of species and time. Noah placed his hand over her paw, tears flowing freely down his face. "I'll watch over them," he promised, glancing toward Luna and her cubs, "and I'll make sure your story is never forgotten." Mama nodded once, a gesture so human that it still amazed Noah even after all these years of communication with the forest creatures. Then she turned and moved slowly back toward Luna, who nuzzled her mother affectionately before leading the small family back into the sheltering trees. At the forest edge, Mama paused one final time, looking back at Noah with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. Then she disappeared into the shadows, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves to mark her passing. Noah remained standing in his garden until the last light of day faded from the sky, his heart full of both sorrow and gratitude. He knew he would never see Mama again in this life, but he also knew that their connection had never been about physical presence. That night, as stars appeared in the velvet darkness above Pine Hollow, a sound echoed through the forest. A chorus of howls, roars, and calls from creatures of all kinds, rising in harmonious tribute. The forest was mourning one of its greatest guardians. Noah stood at his window, listening to the wild symphony with tears streaming down his face. He closed his eyes and added his own voice to the farewell, not with a shout or a cry, but with a soft, wordless song that rose from the depths of his soul. In that moment, he felt it more strongly than ever before, the pulse of the forest heart beating within him, within Luna and her cubs, within every creature and tree and stone. It was the rhythm of life itself, eternally renewing, connecting all things in an unbreakable web of existence. 3 days later, Noah led his children deep into the forest, to a sun-dappled clearing where wildflowers bloomed in profusion. There, beneath the spreading branches of an ancient oak, lay Mama, her massive form peaceful in eternal rest. Luna and her cubs stood sentinel nearby, acknowledging Noah and his children with solemn eyes. Little Eliza, who had inherited her father's connection to the forest creatures, approached without fear. She placed a wreath of flowers around Mama's neck while Thomas set down the small wooden bear carving, the very same one Noah had given to Mama all those years ago, found returned to their doorstep the morning after her visit. "Is this the bear from your stories, Papa?" Eliza asked, her small hand resting gently on Mama's silver fur. "Yes," Noah replied, his voice thick with emotion. "This is Mama, who taught me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting with compassion even when you're afraid." "And she saved the village," Thomas added solemnly, repeating the story he had heard countless times. Noah shook his head gently. "No, little one, we saved each other. That's the most important part of the story. Not that a child helped a bear or a bear helped a village, but that we discovered we weren't as different as we thought. When we removed the boundaries we had created, we found the connection that was there all along." As they spoke, something remarkable began to happen. From the earth beneath Mama's body, tiny tendrils of blue light, the same ethereal glow that illuminated the forest heart, began to emerge. They spiraled upward, enveloping the bear's form in a gentle luminescence that pulsed with the familiar rhythm Noah had known all his life. "What's happening, Papa?" Thomas whispered, his eyes wide with wonder. "The forest is reclaiming one of its own," Noah explained softly, watching as the light grew stronger. "Mama is returning to the heart from which all life springs and to which all life returns." The blue tendrils continued to spread, gradually transforming Mama's physical form into pure light. Where her body had lain, a sapling began to emerge, straight and strong, growing with impossible speed until it stood taller than Noah himself. Its leaves shimmered with the same blue luminescence, pulsing in time with the eternal rhythm of the forest heart. Luna approached the sapling, touching her nose gently to its trunk before turning to Noah. In her eyes he saw not grief but understanding, the acceptance of nature's endless cycle of death and rebirth, of endings that become beginnings. Noah placed his hand on the glowing trunk, feeling the familiar presence within, not Mama as she had been, but as she now was, transformed yet eternal, a permanent guardian of the forest she had loved. "Come," he said to his children, his voice steady despite the tears that glistened in his eyes. "Let's go home and add this chapter to our story." Hand in hand, the three humans walked back toward Pine Hollow, accompanied part of the way by Luna and her cubs before the bears melted away into the familiar shadows of their woodland home. That night, as Noah recounted the day's events to Lily, adding the final chapter to the extraordinary tale that had shaped his life, The village of Pine Hollow was bathed in a gentle blue glow that seemed to emanate from the forest itself, a phenomenon that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come as the Night of Azure Light. And from that day forward, at the center of the Pine Hollow's village square stood a small but ever-growing tree, unlike any other, its leaves shimmering with faint blue luminescence, its branches offering shelter to both humans and woodland creatures without distinction. Beneath its spreading canopy, children learned the story of Noah and the bears, of compassion that transcended boundaries, and of the eternal connection between all living things. In time, saplings from this tree were planted in villages throughout the region, each one pulsing with the rhythm of the forest heart, each one a living reminder of an extraordinary friendship between a human child and a mother bear that had changed the world in ways both profound and everlasting. For in the end, the truest magic was not found in glowing pools or speaking animals, but in the simple yet boundless power of compassion, a force strong enough to bridge worlds, to heal ancient wounds, and to transform fear into understanding. And whenever the wind whispered through the luminescent leaves of Mama's tree, those with quiet hearts and open minds could hear a simple message repeated in its gentle rustling. Remember. Connect, protect. Words that had begun with a desperate mother bear and a fearless human child, and that would continue to echo through the forest and through human hearts for all time to come.